Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. This is a live extreme weather briefing on rapidly intensifying Hurricane Eta in the Western Caribbean on approach to northeastern Nicaragua, maybe even eastern Honduras. Right now, the official forecast track takes it very close to the Puerto Cabezas area. Anywhere north of there, there's hardly any roads, basically open jungle. But this thing is definitely rapidly intensifying. Hurricane Recon has shown that the minimum pressure is now down to 969 millibars, and many of the forecast models are intensifying Hurricane Eta, even up to Category 3 strength on approach to Nicaragua here, even though the official track shows it at a Category 2 on approach. In between those time periods, it does intensify into a major hurricane. And look at that eye. Definitely a massive eye that seems to be sliding just a little bit north of that forecast track. And again, the official pressure is down to 974 millibars, but it does look to be even a little bit lower than that based on a recent hurricane pass. And we're going to discuss this, some preliminary Surginator data from two of the stations. And also I'm going to show you a potential pattern shift around November 9 through 11, where it looks like we could be talking about tornado threat across the southern plains, maybe Dixie with a big time trough coming in. I'm going to show you that as well. But first of all, look at this eye. Definitely the temperatures are warming in the eye. Subsidence is increasing right in the center of this storm. Big time convection, spiral bands going around it. And again, as I mentioned, Hurricane Recon has definitely shown the pressure is bottoming out. 969 millibars, max sustained winds at about 90 miles an hour. Further intensification definitely expected. Right now, the eye is a little bit north of that official forecast track, but it has a lot of convection on the south side of that circulation. There you can see that convection on the south side of the system, and that's probably creating a wobble to the north, but I do expect as that deeper convection rotates around the northern side of the circulation and whips around here, it's likely going to encourage a wobble back to this forecast track. But the HWRF model has been an outlier, and it has shown a forecast track a little bit further north than the rest of the models, grazing the northern coast of Honduras, making landfall a little bit further north, whereas the global models and the rest of the hurricane models have this turn to the west-southwest, making landfall in the east coast of Nicaragua, and that's because of a big-time high-pressure anticyclone that is building off to the north of it. But still some uncertainty with the forecast track. Some of those models do take it a little bit further north, closer to the Honduras-Nicaragua border, but a majority of the model consensus takes that west-southwesterly track with the building of the anticyclone to the north, making landfall near the Puerto Cabezas location. And I was doing some research on a intercept of this Hurricane Eta, and would have had to fly into Managua, where I'm likely still officially married, and then it would be a very, very long drive across the entire country of Nicaragua, all the way up to the northeastern portion, which is the largely jungle on the Caribbean side, indigenous lands up there, and to the north of Puerto Cabezas, up in this area, in the northeastern part of the state, into eastern Honduras. It's mostly bioreserves up there, national forests. Not a lot of roads as well, but there is a road into Puerto Cabezas. So if this does do that west-southwesterly turn, that would put that into the perfect location. But anywhere north of there, you'd be in the weak side of the storm. There is just basically one road that takes you up to Puerto Cabezas from Managua area. Managua is back here near lakes Nicaragua. Down there, this big lake, there's actually a big volcano right in the middle of this lake. These are large freshwater lakes that were caused by big-time volcano eruptions out there. There's even freshwater sharks that live in these lakes down here. One of those volcanoes, I believe, is called Ometepe in the middle of Lake Nicaragua out there. So most of the volcanic activity is in the western portion of Nicaragua, including Masaya volcano right between these two lakes. Many of these volcanoes are still active and even actively erupting. But out here on the eastern side, it's mostly jungle along the Caribbean. A lot of fishing villages out there as well. But it is forecast to make landfall late tonight, early Tuesday morning. And the flights to get out to Managua were about $2,000. I would have had to rent a car, drive all the way across the country, probably would miss the landfall. And there's a good chance that this system could recurve to the northeast. Many of the models take it northeast after meandering over Central America, causing mudslides, catastrophic flooding out there, big problems across northern Nicaragua and Honduras, eventually into Belize, as well as even El Salvador is going to get some major rain. Some of the models even take Eta offshore into the eastern Pacific, whereas the other camp turn it to the northeast towards central Cuba, maybe impacting South Florida even in a few days. And the long-range models also show another tropical system coming out of the Central American gyre, or a wave passing into the Western Caribbean, and that would be Hurricane Theta. That could be a problem in the Gulf as well. But the National Hurricane Center official forecast does show a Category 2 hurricane making landfall, and I think this could intensify into a major hurricane, a Category 3. I know that the 10 p.m. update last night explicitly forecast a major hurricane at landfall, and this is the 1 a.m. Tuesday morning point, basically just offshore Puerto Cabezas there in northeastern Nicaragua. And this is a big problem. Reminds me a little bit of Hurricane Mitch out there that rapidly intensified, ravaged areas of Honduras, northern Nicaragua, parts of Central America with catastrophic mudslides, incredible rainfall out there as well. And notice this hurricane watch up here in eastern Honduras. That's because of the potential northern track that the HWRF has been showing, and some of the other models are starting to jump on board with that a bit. But the HWRF does seem to have a poleward bias in the deep tropics, as we saw with that super typhoon that made landfall in the Philippines. Even though that's only one data point, the HWRF did have a bit of a poleward bias with this. But the HWRF has also been nailing the intensification of these systems and the track almost all season long. So you definitely don't want to throw it out. And based on a recent satellite, it does look like there is a bit of a wobble to the north of the official forecast track. Time will tell if that's just due to the abundance of convection in the southern half of this hurricane that's about to wrap all the way around. But this thing looks like a nasty hurricane already, with hurricane recon indicating pressures potentially down to 969 millibars, with surface winds estimated at 90 knots. It likely is a bit stronger than what it's being indicated right now, with the National Hurricane Center showing it at a intensity of 90 mile per hour sustained winds, with that minimum pressure at about 974 millibars. But just these latest images showing this eye clearing out and the eye temperatures warming. This is infrared satellite. So when you see that red start to appear in the eye, that means that temperatures are warming, and that's from enhanced sinking motion from this big time convection all the way around an intensifying system. So that sinking motion will warm up the eye. And that's exactly what is happening there as this system continues to rapidly intensify. And now I'm going to show you some of the recon data here. This is from tropicaltidbits.com. And there you can see that pressure that was sampled on the second pass through the eye while the Hurricane Hunter aircraft were already down there. They first measured at 974, and then when they made the second pass through the system, it had already dropped even further, another 5 millibars, down to 969 millibars in the center of that relatively large eye. And the fact that it has such a large eye, too, shows that it has a lot of room for intensification, with that eye constricting as this storm continues to rapidly intensify. But so far this morning, we are definitely in a state of extreme rapid intensification as this system approaches northeastern Nicaragua late tonight, early Tuesday morning. And those flight level winds estimated at 90 knots now. So it definitely is intensifying rapidly. And again, there are two different camps amongst the hurricane and the global models on what Eta is going to do after landfall. Most of the models, the majority, agree with that west-southwesterly motion approaching the northeastern tip of Nicaragua. And then after that, there's some divergence in those models. There's a couple different camps. Some of those models actually take Eta all the way across Central America, across northern Nicaragua, and then re-emerging across the eastern Pacific. But a majority of those models meander for 72 to 96 hours. This system over Honduras, causing major problems, catastrophic flooding, mudslides, landslides, really the most dangerous of weather conditions possible out there in Central America. But a majority of those models recurve Eta back out over the very warm waters of the Western Caribbean and a majority of those models take it over central Cuba, and then it could have impacts to the Bahamas and South Florida by then. But still, there's this other camp that takes Eta all the way across northern Nicaragua, over El Salvador, and then eventually over the eastern tropical Pacific. But it looks like a majority of these models do a slow curvature to the northeast, back over the western Caribbean, and potentially over Cuba. And then in the long range, there's even another tropical system that comes out of the western Caribbean here that would be Hurricane Theta, that we definitely have to keep a very close eye on. But this is going to be a huge problem for Nicaragua, for Honduras. You can see the clustering of the hurricane and global models along this west-southwesterly track. Puerto Cabezas is right underneath all of those tracks. This is basically the jungle out here in the biopreserve and national forest in the far northeastern part of Nicaragua, eastern Honduras. If you're up in this area, there's not going to be any roads up there. But if it does hit Puerto Cabezas, there are roads into that area. But you definitely feel for those small fishing villages up and down the Caribbean side of Nicaragua definitely do not have the infrastructure to survive a hurricane like this. There's going to be mudslides coming down from the mountainous jungles up there in northeastern Nicaragua. Mudslides, landslides, just big problems up there. Life-threatening situation. Nicaragua, northern Nicaragua into Honduras, big time problems. And before we transition to the larger scale pattern and what this thing is going to do in the long range and what Theta might do, and the fact that there could be severe weather around November 9 through 12, I wanted to share with you some very preliminary storm surge data that we collected from Plaquemine Parish down in southeastern Louisiana. This is some preliminary Surginator data. We deployed a network of 3 Surginators in Plaquemine Parish, and 2 of those were able to stream live data. One of them, though, was hit by a double-digit storm surge. It looks like 10 to 12 feet for Surginator 2. So we have to pull that data off directly from the sensor, which stored it on a flash drive. So we're going to have that data as well, showing the rapid increase. But this right here is Surginator 3 that recorded this data in Venice, Louisiana, at Cypress Cove Marina. Here you can see a lot of this wave action measured by the Surginator, then a little bit of missing data, then some more wave action, and all of this was streamed live through the cellular network. And then it came back online during the peak storm surge in excess of 6 feet in Cypress Cove, and that's in line with the National Hurricane Center storm surge forecast of 6 to 9 feet down there in Venice. And it was actually much higher in the Buras area, a little bit further northwest of this by about 20 miles. And we definitely had a 10 to 12 foot storm surge there from debris lines. That one went offline because it lost cell phone signal in the middle, the peak of the storm surge. But we definitely do have evidence of a double-digit storm surge in the Buras area. So this is very preliminary data. This was what was live streamed. And the way that the Surginator works is there's a station above the ground that measures the atmospheric pressure, and then the sensor that goes below the water, and that measures the pressure weight of the water above it, using the air pressure as a reference pressure, and then it's able to measure this depth of the storm surge, also factoring in salinity. And most of the flood water here in Station 3 was actually fresh water, and this is pretty close to the Mississippi River Delta, so it's definitely on the fresh side of salt water, whereas Buras was definitely higher salt content right on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico. But Mark, or Chase and Spin on Twitter, definitely has factored in salinity into the calculations to hone that storm surge depth, so we don't have to depend on a 1 to 2 foot range of storm surge, but we can actually measure the storm surge depth exactly. And another thing that's very interesting is look at this linear rise, just a slow, relatively slow, steady rise. This is probably over 30 minutes up to its peak, and then a non-linear decrease afterward as that storm surge went by, and that water just funneled out of the southeastern Plaquemine Parish down there. And there was a secondary rise that we noted at our location at the Venice Marina. That was with Surginator 4, and there was actually some backwash after the hurricane went by. There was a secondary rise, so that's one thing we're going to look at once we pull off the raw data from the flash drive and the Surginator sensor. And our plan is to deploy a network of these Surginators in front of hurricanes to really patch the holes in that storm surge data that was so apparent during Hurricane Laura and other hurricanes with just a couple of storm surge data points. Here is Surginator 4. This is the location that was at the Venice Marina. And the storm surge was rapidly climbing, as you can see there, with wave action on top of it as well. This is all the wave action as that storm surge was climbing at a similar rate to what we measured at the Cypress Cove Marina. See these little waves on top of the storm surge depth on the way up. And there's actually a pretty funny thing that happened, and I'm pretty upset about this, but I made a major error. And right at about 4:40 p.m., you can see that the data feed stopped, the live data feed. And so I was trying to turn on the subsonic sensor to use as a way to measure the reference pressure for this location and to measure the gravity waves inside the hurricane. And I actually connected to the Surginator by accident, and instead of turning on the subsonic, I turned off Surginator 4. And it climbed pretty close to 5 to 6 feet there, maybe even a little bit higher at Venice Marina. And you can see this rapid climb up to 3 feet. And then I turned off the Surginator, trying to turn on the subsonic. So that was an accidental human error. Thankfully, though, Subsonic 4 was still able to record to the flash. So we have to pull off that data, and we're likely going to see 2 different rises. This likely rose all the way up to 6 feet, came back down, and then went up again as our production team was trying to get out of Venice in the middle of the night through those floodwaters, which definitely was a mistake because you just can't get out of there. I've always wanted to ride out a hurricane down in Venice and measure the complex storm surge down there in the mouth of the Mississippi River in the Gulf of Mexico. I'm very thankful for Billy Butler and family for allowing us to stay at the Venice Marina, which is the location of the best fishing in the universe. He wanted me to relay to you guys. I know that he caught a bluefin that was in excess of 850 pounds just last year. So definitely incredible fishing down there in Venice at the mouth of the Mississippi River in Plaquemine Parish. But an extremely storm surge prone area out there as well. And that's Surginator 4. And I wanted to thank the Team Dominator supporter group as well for making this science possible, for making live streams possible, these live updates, live briefings as well. If it weren't for you guys, none of this would be happening. And I'm going to share the final data that we pulled off from the flash drives on the actual sensors that go below the water. And we'll share a map, we'll share the rate of increase of the storm surge depth. And I'm really interested in Surginator 2, which was deployed in Buras, right on the Gulf of Mexico side of the levee. And those waters actually went up to about 10 to 12 feet in Buras as that water was piling up against the levee. Big time debris, watermarks. It actually dislodged our storm surge camera that was watching Surginator 2, but we were able to recover that, thankfully. And overall, definitely a science mission success. The Surginators worked flawlessly. They were streaming live. We did lose cell phone signal down there in Plaquemine Parish, but if we would have deployed it in coastal Mississippi, we definitely would have had data the whole entire time. And even without cell signal, though, it's still recording that data locally on the flash drive. And this is the forecast for November 10, and the long-range models are showing a major pattern shift once again with the development of this big-time trough ejecting from the Rockies, high-amplitude trough. It's backside loaded there around November 8 through 10. This little wave up here ejecting up into Canada is an initial trough that kind of sets the stage for this pattern to happen. And the European is even more favorable for a severe weather pattern. Normally I'd like to see this a little bit more backside loaded upon ejection, but it does look like around November 8, 9, 10, 11, there could be some severe weather developing across the southern plains and Dixie Alley. If this system can maintain its amplitude across Dixie Alley, then I do think there's a chance for even an outbreak of severe weather. This should bring a lot of snow as well to the central Rockies, possible ice and snowstorm across the central and northern plains when it ejects. And it looks like in the Western Caribbean, we've got a potential tropical cyclone Eta developing down there, and this is definitely something to watch. It seems like we're sliding into that pattern where these hurricanes will develop into the Western Caribbean. They'll threaten the Yucatan, portions of Central America, and then get picked up by a trough like this, lifted off to the northeast with potential impacts across the west coast of Florida, the Florida Keys, Bahamas. Cuba could get hammered by this pattern as well. And this is basically the final phase of the hurricane season where we're getting development of hurricanes in the Western Caribbean, The warm waters are still down there, whereas the northern Gulf of Mexico and western Gulf of Mexico, even the central part, those waters are starting to cool, as usually happens with that seasonal cycle. And so most of the warm water is down in this area, the western Caribbean into the far southeastern Gulf of Mexico, southwestern Atlantic. And so these systems, when they slide into Central America, recurve, potentially re-intensify, definitely got to keep a close eye on this along the west coast of Florida, South Florida, because you could easily have a Hurricane Mitch, Hurricane Wilma type of a repetitive situation. And here is this big high pressure. The Bermuda High has been way far to the west this entire season, with even lobes of it extending across the northern Gulf of Mexico and the southeastern U.S. That's continuing and definitely contributing to this pattern of favorable tropical cyclones developing in the western Caribbean and then turning northeast ahead of these troughs that develop. And there could be severe weather with one of these troughs that eject from the Rockies across the southern plains and into Dixie Alley. So now let's look at the GFS model, which is the craziest one with the tropical cyclones. And this is actually the Monday 0Z. That actually looks like it's right now, but it's not. So let's go back. This is the Pivotal Weather website. This is the 6Z GFS forecast for 12Z this morning. Come on, Motel Internet. Definitely got to go over this. There we go. So this is the GFS showing Eta down there in the western Caribbean. There's Eta. On approach to northeastern Nicaragua. This is this morning. You can see that trough exiting the east coast there. Once that passes, and then this anticyclone builds in across the northern Gulf of Mexico, that's what leads to that west-southwesterly turn into northeastern Nicaragua with Eta. And a very favorable environment down there. Minimal wind shear. Very high oceanic heat content. When this trough exits the northeastern U.S., there's going to be a rebuilding in of this anticyclone in its wake, and that's what leads to this west-southwesterly turn toward Puerto Cabezas in Nicaragua. Again, there are some outliers, though, that keep a farther north track right along the north coast of Honduras, burying itself into Belize, and then they recurve to the northeast ahead of this upper low that's charging across the southwestern U.S. That could lead to a turn back to the northeast after Eta meanders along the Central America, along Honduras and northern Nicaragua. This is even Tuesday evening, and that tropical cyclone is still anticipated to be very close to the northeastern tip of Nicaragua, causing major problems, major mudslides, major flooding. Look at this little vorticity streamer extending off to the northeast, likely showing the eventual path of this tropical cyclone as it meanders across Honduras, eventually burying itself into the southern Yucatan, maybe near Belize, maybe near Guatemala, and then eventually one of these systems coming in, diving southeast through the Gulf of Alaska or the northeastern Pacific. Those could definitely pick up Eta, lifting it off to the northeast, and it could even be a threat, again, for western and central Cuba, southern Florida. This is on Wednesday morning. GFS shows basically a weakening, deteriorating Eta over Central America, probably near Honduras. Not a lot of steering coming out here with these troughs, so that's why Eta is just going to meander around Central America, and eventually one of these troughs will pick it up, kick it off to the northeast, Mitch style. And there's a chance that this could be one of the strongest tropical cyclones in the entire Atlantic basin so far this season. Even stronger than Hurricane Laura on approach to northeastern Nicaragua. I'm having some slight internet problems here. It just basically turns into a gyre over Central America. Some of those models take it all the way west into the eastern Pacific. A majority of them, though, do curve Eta off to the northeast toward western or central Cuba. And then in its wake, there are additional tropical waves in a unseasonably active intertropical convergent zone, and it does look like a Hurricane Theta could certainly form in the Western Caribbean after this. So we are not even close to being done with this hurricane season. The internet is quite slow here, but we will grind through. This is on the pivotalweather.com website, an incredible website for visualizing this model data, forecast soundings, severe weather. I saw that the Pivotal Weather guys just added severe weather parameters to the European model as well. So here's this big trough, at least the initial one, and eventually this one ejects off to the northeast toward Canada, and then another one comes in off to its southeast. The operational GFS basically weakens Eta over Central America, but some of those ensemble members do take a tropical cyclone back over the Western Caribbean, re-intensifying and potentially impacting Florida. And if the H-WRF track verifies, that would keep it over potentially warmer waters of the Western Caribbean a bit longer. But a majority of the models dive at west-southwest, with that anti-cyclone building over the Gulf of Mexico in the wake of that trough ejecting from the northeast, taking it into the northeastern corner of Nicaragua. But I also am ready to chase tornadoes. I've chased a lot of hurricanes this year. They're very wet, tiring, exhausting. I'm in the middle of my long drive back to Gizmo, back to my apartment, but I can only drive like 4 or 5 hours a day right now, trying to get back in shape. Here's a bit of an upper low on November 6th. And here's the big trough, though, dominating the western U.S. This is on November 6th, the evening. And this is going to be the beginning of a pretty snowy pattern for the Rockies. A much welcome pattern shift for California, the Pacific Northwest with this system. But this lead system, I don't think, is the one that's going to be responsible for this severe weather, but it kind of paves the way for a kicker system coming in behind it that's going to have deeper amplitude, but still a decent trough coming in with this pattern shift. You can see some vorticity organizing again in the Western Caribbean around the 12th. That's going to eventually form into tropical cyclone Theta. And that could also be a problem for the southeastern Gulf, Western Caribbean, central, South Florida, Bahamas, Cuba type of a environment. But really the European model is showing a much more favorable severe weather system. This lead system is likely going to eject over top of this ridge, but then there's another kicker system that's going to develop and swing around its south side and then become the dominant trough. It's going to be a high amplitude trough. At least that's what's being depicted by the GFS. The European has a much cleaner trough development with just this one single massive trough diving down into the southern plains. But this could be the beginning of the fall season, the much awaited fall severe weather and tornado season for the southern plains, maybe for Dixie Alley. Could happen in November. You can see a bit of a trough axis developing on the south side of this system that's going to eject over top this ridge. There you can see Theta over central Cuba at around November 8. Who knows if that'll form or not? That's still way out there, but the GFS definitely forms it with a big blocking high off to its north. Big blocking high off to its north. That could cause a Theta to meander quite a bit. So this is a lead system that lifts over top this anticyclone over the northeast, and then look at this kicker system coming in through California through the southern Rockies, and this is the one that I'm watching for severe weather threat on like November 10 through 12 for the southern plains and for Dixie Alley. Also the same system that could theoretically kick northeast a Hurricane Theta down there in the Western Caribbean. Let's go forward to the 9th of November. So this is definitely a severe weather pattern. Right here, it's got a positive tilt, backside loaded, trying to regain a neutral tilt and a negative tilt upon ejection across the southern plains. But I do think there's going to be a decent Cape axis here with this. It's possible that a Hurricane Theta could disrupt the warm sector once again and prevent severe weather from happening. But in that case, we'll just have to intercept Hurricane Theta down in South Florida, maybe in Cuba, but look at that thing meander because of this monster banana-shaped high. Very similar to Zeta, this one builds in here from the northwestern Gulf of Mexico into the Caribbean. A big-time westward extension of this subtropical high. And that's why the Gulf of Mexico has been so incredibly active this year, the Western Caribbean. And for seasonal forecasting of this, we definitely predicted an active Atlantic season. But I'm wondering if it's possible to predict whether the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean could be the active subset of the Atlantic, with the open Atlantic being quite harsh for tropical cyclones. And I do think that you could have predicted the westward extension of this Bermuda high using sea surface temperature, global teleconnections. But definitely we'll have to leave the seasonal climate forecasting experts for that. But to be able to predict the westward extension of this Bermuda high, you certainly could predict that the environment would be more favorable across the Gulf of Mexico and the Western Caribbean than the open Atlantic, contributing to this record-breaking Gulf of Mexico hurricane season, with Louisiana itself getting 4 tropical cyclones. You had Sally, you had Zeta, you had Hurricane Laura in the western portion of Louisiana, Hurricane Delta that we intercepted down in the northern Yucatan and also the central Gulf Coast. I tried to get to northeastern Nicaragua for Eta, but it just doesn't look like it's going to happen. Would have been a major challenge as well for solo chase up there, renting a car down in Managua and then blasting up to Puerto Cabezas. But a lot to talk about moving forward as we have this active pattern ahead, the potential for severe weather. We've got to watch Hurricane Eta very closely. That continues to intensify, become more symmetric. Does look like it's lifting a bit north of the hurricane center track. We'll have to watch closely today to see if the models adjust and maybe take it a bit further north, closer to the H-Wharf track. I suspect, though, that this is just a wobble due to the abundance of convection in the south side of Hurricane Eta. And once that convection wraps all the way around the system, that'll likely cause a recorrection back to this track and then a turn to the west-southwest, making landfall near the Puerto Cabezas area. This is the Radar Omega app, an incredible app for tracking tropical cyclones as well as tracking snowstorms, winter weather, and severe weather, receiving those alerts. You can look at all the different satellite products as well. Hurricane recon data, model data as well. Come on. It's hotel internet. But I suspect this is going to be a major hurricane when it comes in, making landfall. There it is. And it has a big eye, which tells you that there's a lot of room for intensification. Infrared shows continual warming of the eye as well as this rapid intensification process is continuing. Latest recon data shows that the pressure is down to 969 millibars. Look at this transverse banding here, gravity waves forming as this atmospheric disturbance continues to become more prominent out there. Major spiral banding happening, wrapping into that low pressure. It's another indication of this rapidly intensifying system, perfectly symmetric, central dense overcast in there. Beautiful storm, but look at that thing. But it's going to be incredibly destructive out there for portions of Nicaragua. So still the forecast track is right over Puerto Cabezas, just on the south side of that lagoon. This area up here is solid jungle, national forest, bioreserve. But there are fishing villages, indigenous fishing villages up and down this coast to the north of Puerto Cabezas. So, and they just don't have the infrastructure to survive a hurricane that's this powerful. So definitely a scary situation for this area. And as it meanders inland, there's going to be mudslides, catastrophic flooding across northern Nicaragua, much of Honduras, eventually Guatemala and Belize as well are going to be impacted by this. And even on water vapor, you can see the drying out of that eye. And that's going to wobble back to the National Hurricane Center forecast track with just an abundance of convection, a little bit of an asymmetry, very subtle asymmetry happening right now, forcing that wobble to the north. But there's a chance that the H-Wharf could be right again And that outlier could be accurate with a slightly further north track of this hurricane. But look at this thing. Definitely reminds me of Wilma, Mitch, those types of monster Western Caribbean hurricanes that just intensify incredibly rapidly. And there's a chance we could see the strongest hurricane in the Atlantic Basin yet this season coming in here. So thank you guys. Time for me to hit the road here. I got to get back home to get ready to intercept any of these. I'm going to continue with these weather reports. We're going to download the Surginator data. I'm going to share that with you as well. Likely showing that 10 to 12 foot storm surge in the Buras area in Plaquemine Parish. And I'm going to rest up and get ready for the next storm. Thank you guys for joining me. Hope you enjoy my weather reports. Never stop chasing.